At the start of World War I, treatment of wounded soldiers dramatically changed. Over 80% of battlefield wounds were from artillery shell fragments, causing severe injuries. Muddy and manure-fertilized fields led to deadly infections like gas gangrene. Delays in wound treatment caused high lethality, and with over 200,000 wounded in the war's first months, outdated triage systems were quickly overwhelmed. It was in this context that motorized surgical teams were introduced to treat wounded soldiers at the front lines. Though primitive by today's standards, field hospitals significantly decreased mortality rates by providing immediate care. A 1918 French Army study found that of those treated for wounds within 1 to 3 hours had a 10 to 12% mortality rate, but delaying beyond 8 to 12 hours increased mortality to 75%. Renault trucks played a significant role in medical and logistics fields during World War I. Marie Curie introduced mobile radiological units that used Renault trucks equipped with X-ray machines to provide immediate medical care. And other specialized trucks were also used, including those that served as mobile surgical suites, one of which is part of the Indiana Military Museum's collection.
Hello, I'm Jim Osborne, curator here at the Indiana Military Museum, and I want to welcome you today to our continuing series on specific topics about artifacts we have on exhibit here at the Indiana Military Museum. And right behind me is a Renault 1914 field hospital truck. This is extremely rare artifact that we will go through in some detail, and I hope you enjoy. We're standing here looking at our model 1914 Renault field hospital. This field hospital truck came to us, came to the museum about 30 years ago. In World War I, there was a resident of Daviess County who was injured very badly in World War I, and one of these actual ambulances, just like this, was used to save his life. He had apparently the wherewithal when the war ended to purchase this field hospital truck as a memento, as a souvenir, and actually brought it back, had it brought back to the States just for that purpose, just to save it and remember that this is the vehicle and the operating equipment that saved his life. It was Galtney Oil Company and that actually donated it to us, and that's how we got it. Now, we don't know the name of the World War I soldier. They did not know any longer. I mean, even though it had been passed down through the family, they no longer knew the history. Something we really need to look into and secure before it's not available. But well, that's another day. The field hospital version here, of course, has operating equipment. It has boilers to sterilize the equipment and sterilize the operating equipment. And it has multiple pieces inside that where the operating equipment are kept. The vehicle itself was operated by a gasoline engine. This model today does not run. We do have the gasoline engine, and it's not in the vehicle now. We've got it out, and with the purpose of someday having that restored and maybe getting this back to operating, actually running down the road. As you notice, it has wheels. Steel molded wheels with molded spokes, etc., and then molded hard rubber as the tire on each of the front and back. And of course, in World War I, that was quite common. I can tell you from experience that this vehicle has a turning radius of about a half a block. It's very difficult to make a sharp turn with this vehicle. Something I'm sure that they improved later on, but this you'd have to have a target of where you're heading and start heading there pretty early. One of the interesting things about the field hospital truck was that it was being used constantly. If it was not being used as an operating room and working on injuries and so forth, you would see pictures, and I've seen pictures of these that have piles of uniforms sitting outside, just outside the truck or alongside it. And what they were doing is they were boiling the uniforms for all the soldiers and all the troops as a service, basically to keep the lice out of their uniforms. And so it had a dual purpose out in the battlefield, and it was constantly being used for that purpose if it wasn't being used for battle wounds and injuries. The configuration of this truck, as I said, is just very similar to a field ambulance. They look almost identical. Not until you look inside that you see the additional equipment here for the operating units. One thing we should note about this is that it's right-hand drive. Early on, the French built vehicles with right-hand drive, and they quickly changed to the left. And British, of course, being about the only British and the Swedish being the only continentals that really stayed with with right-hand drive. So, and also, you know, this is painted what is known as horizon blue. And this was the color that the French used in World War I at the beginning of the war. Their uniforms were called horizon blue, and they wore a blue similar to this. The helmets were painted this same color. And it quickly changed. 1914, when the war began, this is what they went to war with, was horizon blue. And by 1915, it was some version of olive drab, what we know as olive drab. All the various versions of olive drab. There's probably 100 different combinations of colors of olive drab, but all basically look the same. As far as restoration on this vehicle, we had to have the front hood, the engine hood cover, completely rebuilt because it was a hunk of rust and rusted so much that the slot that accommodates a crank that would crank start the engine. So that's why this slot is here in front. And of course, this is interesting. This is your first version of a front bumper. A little different than what we're used to, but you can see where it would hit objects before you destroy the front end of the truck. You can see the radiator is behind the engine and not in front. So you can see the radiator all sits right there in front of the driving compartment, and of course the copper coils there. The roof is a canvas top roof on the vehicle. The restoration also on this vehicle includes the side panels, where you see the woodwork, the framed woodwork. Kind of reminds you of an old Woody's station wagon back in the 40s. Well, at any rate, the same plan here. This woodwork held your whole rear body portion. And this section right here is all new. We had to replace all of that. A lot of the wood is original, and we didn't have to replace too much of that. You can see the flooring is all original. And inside, this is an example of the multiple boilers that are inside the vehicle. Each one of them had a specific purpose. Behind the volunteer surgeon we have standing here permanently, you'll see multiple of drawers, and that's where all of the equipment was kept. And also, those drawers were heated and sterilized because there is a boiler behind us, behind the vehicle, that's mounted behind the vehicle, that is a primary boiler for the whole system as well. So, you know, it's interesting that they knew a lot about the need to sterilize. And a lot of the pictures you see of these units when they're being used is of course, the operating itself very seldom was inside this unit right here. It was done outside, and they would have an awning that draped out across the side of the vehicle, you know, to keep the sun and so forth off of them. And so they did the operating for the most part right out here, outside the door. As far as we know, this is the only existing Renault field hospital unit still left. At least that was what we were told by the Renault Museum about 25, 30 years ago. When they found out we had it, they contacted us and asked us if we'd be interested in parting with it. And we got into some negotiations at the time because we hadn't done all of our restoration on this at that time. And we told them that we would trade it for a World War I French tank, one of the Renault tanks. And they turned that down, saying that they didn't have access to any additional French tanks from World War I. They didn't have any extras that they could part with. I don't know how many are actually in existence in France, but the way they acted, there weren't very many. I would think that there were quite a few, but nonetheless, they countered, and they offered us 2 French post-war tanks for a trade. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember the models now, but I've got it in writing somewhere in the files. But at any rate, they offered us these 2 French tanks in trade, which we thought about. We seriously thought about for just a short time. And then we thought, well, you know, they would be fun to have. They were operational. But then we got to thinking, what else would we do with them? They wouldn't be a particular interest to our visitors, and certainly not as much as this field hospital would be. And so we made the decision not to do that. So that was the end of the negotiations. So, but at that time, we were told that they did not have one of these in France. They had the ambulance version, but not this. In fact, when I was visiting the Renault Museum in Paris, they had a computer-generated deal right there when you walked in, and you could pull up every vehicle that Renault ever made, and you could pull this up on the computer.
Well, we hope that you've enjoyed our little run-through of the 1914 Renault Field Hospital truck. And stay with us on our continuing program of covering artifacts here at the Indiana Military Museum. We have one of the most comprehensive and largest collections of various military artifacts in the country. And we'll cover more of these topics one by one. Stay with us in the next program.